Queen Mu, and the Egyptian Sphinx by Augustus Plegeon, MD, author of the Sacred Mysteries among the Mayas and the Quiche, sketch of the ancient inhabitants of Peru and their civilizations, etc., etc. A lot of books, alright? This is from 1896. And again, I just want to show a list of his authors that he quotes or the sources he uses. Like a lot of famous historians, people of primary sources, like Jose Acosta, one of the conquistadors that came. Alright, Confucius. Alright, just want you to see even Blavatsky, even that philosophy, right? So a lot of things he uses, so just want to say so you can verify his sources. He has footnotes throughout the book. Alright, so all these people, Marco Polo, Herodotus, and all these other people, historians. The book of Joshua, alright, book of Isaiah, Kingsborough, Lord Kingsborough. Alright, all these people that he's quoting. I just wanted to show you. He has a lot of different sources, and we're gonna continue where we left off. Alright, so on part 13 of this series, we left off in this paragraph of chapter 2. Just want to remind everybody what he left off saying, in case you're new and everything. And it said, the object of these pages is not to give here all the proofs that can be adduced of the presence of the Mayas in India and of the influence of their civilization on its inhabitants, but to follow their tracks along the shores of the Indian Ocean, into the interiors of Asia, across Asia Minor, where they established colonies onto Africa. Alright, talk about Mayas, until finally they reached the valley of the Nile and laid the foundation of the renowned Egyptian kingdom some 6,000 years before the reign of Menes. Alright, 6,000 years before even King Menes, the first terrestrial Egyptian king. Terrestrial. Alright, because why the other ones are what? Gods, mythology, who actually lived in the Western world, which is America. That's why they're 6,000 years before Menes, a whole history. Right? So we're gonna go into chapter 3 of this book. We're gonna continue. It's great information here. I'm gonna correlate. So it says here, continuing the examination of the cosmogonic diagrams of ancient historic Asiatic nations, we find next in importance the Emsov of the Chaldees. It can be seen at a glance that this also is an amplification of the Maya symbol of the universe, as yet existing at Uxmal. Alright, the symbol that they have in that book, it's a Mayan symbol that you can still find in the temple of Uxmal, as well as the Sri Santara of the Hindus. It's in Uxmal. It may be asked, how came the Chaldees to adopt the same geometrical figures used by the Mayas to symbolize their cosmogonic conceptions? How did they come across these Chaldees? Who are the Chaldees? Remember, Abraham's dad was a Chaldee. Are these an ancient people who came out of the Maya lands or America? The Chaldees. And the Chaldees, where was really Chaldee? There is a whole book written about Chaldee being in Ireland. Alright, the ancient Chaldees. So we're going to get into all that in future videos. We'll see how it correlates to what Augustus Plegeon is telling us here. Alright, how did these Chaldeans get all these symbols that the Mayas already have in their temples? Berosus, the Chaldean historian, tells us that civilization was brought to Mesopotamia by Oannes. Alright, so the Chaldean history says that their founder was Oannes. Alright, in Mesopotamia, Oannes, and 6 other beings, half man, half fish, so 7 altogether, right? 7. So they're half man, half fish, who came from the Persian Gulf, in other words, by men who dwelt in boats, which is preciously the meaning of the vocable Oannes or Hoana. In the Maya language, ha, water, die, na, house, residence. He who has his residence on the water, Oannes. They who lived on the water or traveled on a ship, something that floated in the water you can live in. A ship. Is that what they mean by these fish people? He who has his residence on the water. Sir Henry Rawlinson, speaking of the advent of the early Chaldean in Mesopotamia, says, with this race originated the art of writing, the building of cities, the institution of religious system, the cultivation of all sciences and of astronomy in particular, right? So these 7 individuals brought all this knowledge over to so-called Mesopotamia, right? And philology, like architecture, may serve as guide in following the footsteps of a people in its migrations on the face of the earth. Then we may safely affirm that the Mayas, at some epoch or other, traveling along the shores of the Indian Ocean, reached the mouth of the Indus and colonized Balochistan and the countries west of the river to Afghanistan, right? Who colonized that? Mayas, they're letting you know. Where, to this day, Maya tribes live on the north banks of the Kabul River. You hear that? There's still Maya tribes there. The names of the majority of the cities and localities in that country are words having a natural meaning in the Maya language. They are in fact those of ancient cities and villages whose ruins cover the soil of Yucatan and of several still inhabited. I have made a careful collation of the names of these cities and places in Asia, which with their meaning in the Maya language. In this work, my esteemed friend, the Reverend Dr. Don Crescencio Carrillo and Ancona, the present Bishop of Yucatan, has kindly helped me, as in many other studies of Maya root and words now obsolete, the objects to which they applied having ceased to exist or having fallen into disuse. Bishop Carrillo is a literary gentleman of well-known ability, the author of an ancient history of Yucatan, a scholar well versed in the language of his forefathers. He is of a Maya descent. Following the Mayas in their journeys westward along the seacoast, we next find traces of them at the head of the Persian Gulf, where they formed settlements in the marshy country at the mouth of the Euphrates, known to history under the name of Akkad. The meaning of that name, given to the plains and marshy land situated to the south of Babylonia, has been until of late a puzzle to students of Assyriology, and it still is an enigma to them why a country utterly devoid of mountains should have been called Akkad, alright? So he's letting you know again, all these physical characteristics of these ancient places do not match today's modern places. They say, you know, that these places were located at anciently, and, you know, the land is different. And he's saying there's no mountains there. Why would it be called Akkad? Alright? Have not the well-known scholars, the late George Smith of Chaldean Genesis fame, Reverend Professor A.J. Saucy of Oxford in England, and Mr. Francois Lenormand in France, discovered by translating one of the bilingual lexicographical tablets found in the royal library of the palace of King Usurbanipal in Nineveh, that in Akkadian language it meant mountain, high country, whilst the word for low country, plain, was summer, and that by a singular antithesis the Sumerians inhabited the mountains to the eastward of Babylonia, and the Akkadians the plains watered by the Tigris and the Euphrates and the marshes of the mouth of the river, right, with a question mark. So now we get an etymology of these words, right? Summer meant really a plain, or, you know, like the lowland. That's what summer meant. And Akkad, Akkadia, Akkad was mountainous, mountain, a high place. That's what they're letting you know here, right? The way they try to explain such strange anomaly is by supposing that in very remote times the Akkadi dwelt in the mountains and the Sumeri in the plain, the Sumeri in the plains, and that at some unknown, unrecorded period and for some unknown reason these nations must have migrated en masse, exchanging their abodes. So they exchanged places, they're saying, but still preserving the names by which they were known, regardless of the fact that said names were at variance with the characters of the localities in which they now dwelt. But they did it both from custom and tradition. So they're saying that, oh wait, where Acadia is today is lowlands, and what Sumerians is, it was a little higher, so it's the opposite of what the names mean. So it doesn't make sense. Shall we say si no me vero ben trovato? Although this may or may not be the case, there being no record that said permutation ever took place, and it therefore cannot be authenticated. The Maya, of which we find so many vestiges in the Akkadian language, alright, so many vestiges of the Maya in the Akkadian languages, affords a most natural, thence rational etymology of the name Akkad, and in perfect accordance with the characters of the country thus named. Akal is a Maya word, Akal Akkad, the meaning of which is pond, marshy ground, and Akil is a marshy ground full of reeds and rushes, such as was and still is lower Mesopotamia and the localities near the mouth of the Euphrates. As to the name summer, its etymology, although it is also very clear according to the Maya, seemed perplexing to the learned Mr. Lenormand, who nevertheless has interpreted it correctly. The low country, right? The Akkadian root sum evidently corresponds to the Greek bottom, depression, and to the Mayan com, a valley, com. The Sumeri would then be inhabitants of the valleys, while the Akkadi would be those of the marshes. All right? From this and from what will directly appear, let it not be supposed that the ancient Akkadian and ancient Maya are cognate languages. All right? The great number of Maya words found in the Akkadian have been engrafted on it by the Maya colonists. All right, the Maya what? Colonists who in remote times established themselves in Akkad and became prominent after a long sojourn in the country under the name of Chaldee. Chaldee. All right. Though the efforts of such eminent scholars as Dr. Hinks, Sir Henry Rawlinson, Dr. Upherd, Monsieur Greville, Professor Saucy, and Mr. Francois Lenormand and others, the old Akkadian tongue, or much of it, has been recovered by translating the tablets that composed King Assurbanipal's library. Mr. Lenormand has published an elementary grammar and vocabulary of it. From this I cull the few following words that are pure Maya. Alright, so he's going to compare these Akkadian words with the Maya. Alright, Augustus Plegeon is going to show you. With the same signification in both languages, and they mean the same thing. Having but a limited space to devote here to so interesting a subject, in my selection I have confined myself to words so unequivocally similar that their identity cannot be questioned. Alright, you cannot question. It's the same word, same root from the Maya. He got a table. He said there's so many though it wouldn't fit in this book. It'd be its own book if I really was going to compare the Akkadian language with the ancient Maya language. Now here's the table. Now we start with Akkadian. It says right, water. Maya, ha, right, same thing. Is also the Egyptian for water. Ha, Maya, ha, hawa, right, the ha, Akkadian, Abba, father, Maya, ba. And in most, Semitic languages, that's also father, right, Abba. Like in Aramaic, it's Abba, same thing. Father, Maya is Abba or Ba, Abba, Ba. Akkadian, Bala, companion, also pal, a pal. Maya, pal, companion. That's my pal. You see where we get that word? That's my pal right there. That's my companion. That's a Maya word we've been saying. It's not an English word. We've been saying a Maya word when we say pal. Right? And the Akkadian's also Bala or Pala. Bal. Akkadian Pab means before, that which is in front. Gad hand. And then Maya's Kab, hand, arm, branch of a tree. Kab, a particle that in composition indicates that the action of the verb takes place quickly. Alright, it says Akkadian, Ge, that which is below. Maya Ke, radical or camel, to descend softly without noise. Akkadian Ka, to complete, to finish. Maya Kanak, abundant, exceeding. Kak, fire, to burn, hence to destroy, to finish. Akkadian Kalama, the word, the countries. Maya Kala, the word, the universe. Akkadian Kas, two. Maya Ka, two. Akkadian Keaku, inside of the earth, under. Maya Kele, upside down, the inverse side. Akkadian Ki, the inhabitable earth. Maya Ki La Kabil, the nations, the ancestors. Akkadian Kul, the seed of animals. Maya Kul, the exact same thing, the seed, the rump, also to worship as in Assyrian. Akkadian Kun, the tail. Maya Kun, muliers pundenda. I don't know what that means. Akkadian Kun, daybreak. Maya King, day, sun. Kun, king. And we got some more right here. It says Akkadian Ku, plai or place. Maya Ku, the place in safety. Akkadian Lao, sign of possession, to take. Maya Lao, to take away, to empty, same thing, right? Lao. Akkadian Ma, express the idea of loyalty, the earth. Maya, Ma, the earth, the country. Ma is likewise Egyptian for country, place. Ma, place, the earth. Ma. Alright. Akkadian Ta, expresses the idea of an internal or external locative into from within, as Tan, Mata, country. Maya is Ta, place, smooth and level ground. Tan, toward, in the center, before, near. Akkadian Ra, to bear toward. Maya La, place, neighborhood, place where one stands. Akkadian Mi, Me, prefixes to verbs, nouns or adjectives, is the sign of negation. Maya Ma, prefixes to verbs, nouns or adjectives, is the sign of negation. Are almost the same. Ma ulil halna, don't wish to eat. It says Akkadian men or men, to be. Maya En, I am. Akkadian Nana, mother. Maya Na, Nana, mother, Na, Nana, Na, Na, mother, mother, right? The same thing almost. Akkadian Sar, white. Maya Sak, Sar, Sak, white. Akkadian Sun, Sana, fons, or four, sorry. Maya Khan, four. Sun, Khan, four. Also serpent, also serpent. All right, so that was a table, and it continues right here. Akkadian Sir, light. Sassil, light, brilliance. All right, Akkadian Tab, to place, to add, and Maya Tab, to tie, to join, to unite, to add, to unite, to place. Tab, tab. Akkadian Shah, or Shana, fish. Maya is Kai, Kai, fish. Akkadian Shas, to cut. Maya Shak, to cut with an axe. All right, so he compared a lot of good ones right there. The moon in Akkadian is Idu. Maya is U. All right, and the moon, Hurki, another way. Hulking, sunstruck, lit by the sun. Hulking, Hurki. Wow. It says modern Assyriologists, after translating the tablets on Assyrian and Chaldean magic written in the Akkadian language, agree with the prophetical books of scripture in the opinion that the Chaldees descended from the primitive Akkadians, and that those people spoke a language differing from the Semitic tongues. A writer in the British and Foreign Review says Babylonia was inhabited at an early period by a race of people entirely different from the Semitic population known in historic times. This people had an abundant literature, and they were the inventors of a system of writing which was at first hieroglyphic. Of the people who invented this system of writing, very little is known with certainty, and even the name is a matter of doubt. Alright, so that's a quote from that book, so they don't really know. According to Berosus, who was a Chaldean priest, these first inhabitants of Babylonia, whose early abode was in Chaldea, were foreigners of another race. They were foreigners. So are we talking about modern Chaldea today, what they say it is? Or again, I got a book that is correlating a lot that's saying Ireland was Chaldea, the Chaldees were in Ireland. All right, well, we'll see. Or was it in America? But I know that basically these people are being connected to Maya, so there's a connection to America. And then even what I was saying, that all these old world people, a lot of these are basically in the true old world in America. That's the same connection I was talking about. Even if it was in Ireland, like they're saying right here, these people were foreigners. So a lot of those people in Ireland actually arrived from America in ancient times and other places of Europe and Asia. But they were foreigners. That's even in their own local legends, right? He carefully established a distinction between them and the Assyrians. Those primitive Akkadians, those strangers in Mesopotamia, the aborigines would naturally have regarded as guests in the country. Taking a hint from this idea, they called their first settlement Ula or Ul, a Maya word meaning guest, newly arrived, okay? In this settlement in the marshy ground, lest the natives of the wild beasts that swarmed in the reeds should attack them, the strangers surrounded their dwellings with palisades and designated the place as Kal-Ti, whence Kaldi, by which their tribe continued to be known even when they became influential. The word Kalti is composed of two Maya primitives, Kal, to be enclosed with post, and Ti, place. In my work, The Monuments of Mayak and Their Historical Teachings, I have traced step by step the journey of the Maya colonists along the course of the Euphrates to the city of the sun, Babylon, called in Akkadian, according to Mr. Lenormand, Kadingira or Tintir, the etymology of which appears to be unknown to him, though very easily found by means of the Maya. So a lot of these anthropologists don't know the meanings of these words or the beginnings or the origins, but Augustus keeps reminding everybody, if you look into the Maya phonetics of vocals, you can find the meaning and roots of these words. The name Kadingira seems to be composed of four Maya primitives: Ka, city; Ting, a particle which in composition indicates the place where one is or an action happens. King, a priest. La, eternal truth, the God, the Sun. Ka Ting King La, or be it Ka Dingira, is the city where reside the priests of the Sun. The name Tintir, Maya Tintil, means tin, the place where a thing actually exists. Tilis, by elision, til, sacred, mysterious, venerable. Tintil would therefore be the holy, the mysterious place, a very appropriate title for a sacred city. Til may again be the radical of tilil, which means property. Tintil would in this case signify, this place is my property. It belongs to me, the God, the Sun, which is in perfect accordance with this other ethnic name of Babylon, Ka Ra, or be it Ka La, the city of eternal truth of the Sun. The name given to the temple of the seven lights of heaven, as well as its mode of construction, shows that the builders were colonists from a country where that kind of edifice, the pyramid of stone, was not only common, but had so been from remote ages. Alright? Letting you know. Babel is a word whose etymon has been a bone of contention for Orientalists and philologists. They are not yet agreed as to its meaning. They don't know what Babel, they're saying, these scholars, simply because they do not know to what language it belongs, nor whence came the people who raised the monument, who raised the Tower of Babel. Now remember, we're talking about Acadians, we're talking about now the Tower of Babel, what's in Canada, Acadia, what did UB News or UBTV did a video on, the Tower of Babel being up there near Acadia, right? Babel, who really built it? Who were the Mayas? And were they really called Mayaks or Mayas at this remote time of history? All right, these people from the Americas, or these people on this side of the world, the true old world. All right, we're just surfing the wave here. We don't know what he's trying to say, but we're surfing the wave. We are told they were strangers in the plains of Shinar, in the plains, and they're strangers who built this thing, these strangers that came. Did they come originally from Mayak? Did they come from Mayak? They spoke the vernacular of that country, far off beyond the sea, toward the rising sun, and Genesis asserts that they had journeyed from the east. They had journeyed from the east. Flip the maps. Ba, in Maya, has various meanings. The principal, however, is father, ancestor. Bel has also several significations. Among these, it stands for way or custom. Babel would therefore indicate that the sacred edifice was constructed according to the way, the custom of the builders' ancestors. All right, these are Maya word, Babel. Landa, in his work Las Cosas de Yucatan, informs us that the Mayas were very fond of giving nicknames to all persons prominent among them. The same fondness exists today among their descendants, who seldom speak of their superiors by their name, but a sobriquet descriptive of some marked characteristic observed by them and belonging to the individual. For instance, should anybody inquire concerning me, my proper name, of the men who for months accompanied me in my expeditions in the ruined cities of Yucatan, they certainly would shake their heads and answer, "Don't know him." But if asked about the Mexnal, he of the long beard, then they would at once understand who was meant. Alright, so nicknames, we do that a lot in my country still. This same custom seems to have prevailed among the primitive Akkadians, judging from the names of their first kings, the builders of the cities along the banks of the Euphrates, whose seals are stamped on the bricks used in the foundations of the edifices erected by them. Uruk, right? Uruk, we are told, is one of them. Likbabi is another frequently met with. It is well known that no stones are to be found on the alluvial plains of Mesopotamia, that consequently the first cities were built of mud, all right? Mud, all right? There's no megalithic structures over there, all right? I've been trying to tell everybody that they don't have megalithic structures during the first years in their origins. It's all mud, that is, of sun-dried bricks, adobe. So we know that Tower of Babel is described to be built with mud bricks. Now we know that Pyramid of Cholula, which has a very similar story of the Tower of Babel. I'm not saying it's the original, because even there in their stories they say it's a duplicate, an exact duplicate of the original Tower of Babel. and they did it with sun-dried bricks as well, mud. The whole pyramid of Cholula is a whole mountain that they thought it was a mountain, but it's an actual pyramid, very big. It's the largest base of pyramid in the world, bigger, 4 times bigger than anything in Egypt. All right, the base of it. It is probably from that fact that they called the king who ordered them to be built Uruk, he who makes everything from mud. He who makes everything from mud, Uruk. Uruk is a word composed of two Maya primitives, huk, to make everything, and luk, mud. In composition, hukluk would become contracted into huluk, hence Uruk. Alright, you see how it breaks down eventually? This is also said to have been the name of the city of Erech, the seat of a famous Akkadian ecclesiastical college. This, however, does not alter the meaning of the Maya etymology of the word, nor make it less appropriate since the town was built of bricks dried in the sun of mud, consequently. As to the name of King Likbabi, it is also composed of two Maya primitives, lik, to transport, and bab, to row. It is extremely probable that when constructing the temples in whose foundations his name has been found, as there were no roads for transporting easily by land his building materials, he made use of the most convenient waterway offered by the Euphrates, hence his sobriquet Likbabi, he who transports all things by water, that is, by rowing. In the language of Akkad were preserved all the scientific treatises of the Babylonians, but from the time when the Semitic tribes established themselves in Assyria, in or about the 13th century BC, the Akkadian language began to fall into disuse. It was soon forgotten by the generality of the inhabitants. Its knowledge became the exclusive privilege of the priests, who were the depositaries of all learning. When the Semitic conquerors imposed their own dialect on the vanquished, the ancient tongue of Akkad remained, according to Sir Henry Rawlinson, the language of science in the East, as Latin was in the West during the Middle Ages. In the 7th century BC, Assurbanipal, king of Assyria, tried to revive it. Alright, so remember who the Assyrians are. These are the people of Ashur, who is the son of Shem, right? He's a Semite. Assyria, Ashur, one of the sons of Shem. He ordered copies of the old treatises in the Akkadian language to be made, and also an Assyrian translation to be placed beside the text. So they come with their Semitic or Hebraic language, right? And there was local people there already who were speaking the so-called Akkadian, what Augustus is saying Mayan. Really, this is old school ancient people, all right? Even before they were called Maya, it's not really Maya, but these are the same people that is for reference used. It is those copies that have reached our times, conveying to us the knowledge of this ancient form of speech that but few among the learned men of Babylon had preserved at the time of the fall of the Babylonian Empire, when Darius took possession of the city of Belus. We are informed by the book of Daniel that none of the king's wise men could read the fatidical words written by a spirit's hand on the wall of the banquet hall of King Belshazzar. Only one, Daniel the prophet, who was learned in all the lore of ancient Chaldeans. Alright, Daniel the son of King David. Yes, Daniel was the son of King David, who was exiled in Babylon. Right? So only him could interpret them, it says. Dr. Isaac of New York and other learned rabbis assert that these words were Chaldaic, but they were and still are vocables pertaining to the American Maya language, having precisely the same meaning as given them by Daniel. The Maya words manel, manet, tek, upa, read in English, manel, thou art past in the sense of finished, mane, thou art bought or made, hence weighed, all things being bought and sold by weight. Tek, light, not ponderous. The word is taken today in the sense of swift, agile. Upa, though, will be broken in two. To that word are allied pa and paksal, to break in two, to break asunder, to scatter the inhabitants of a place. Is this a mere coincidence? By no means. There can be no doubt that the Akkadian or Chaldean tongue contained many Maya words. The limits of this work do not allow me to adduce all the proofs I could bring forward to fully establish their intimate relationship. A few more must suffice for the present.
And I have to say, archaeologists like to insult me by calling me a pseudoscientist. I can't think of anything more pseudoscientific than the Clovis First doctrine, which locked American archaeology for 50 years in a particular framework which we now know was totally wrong. Nothing good about it at all. A complete mistake. What I'm hoping the book will do in the long run is that it will lead to more attention being focused on the Americas. This is a very neglected area of the world as far as deep and ancient archaeology goes. The recent history of the Americas has been relatively well studied, but the deep and ancient history has not been well studied. And I think America is going to contain revelations for us about our story and about our past. And I'm serious when I suggest that America is the most plausible and the most likely home base for a lost civilization. If you're
going to read from this book again, we've read from this book before in other videos. This book is Mysteries of Ancient South America by Harold T. Wilkins. And we go to chapter 5, page 117. And it says here, The Sign of the Sun, World's Oldest Alphabet. In chapter 3, I told the romantic story of the discovery by the young gunner Lieutenant P.H. Fawcett in the jungle of Ceylon in 1893 of a strange creeper-covered stone of ancient unknown date which bore hieroglyphics or letters of peculiar and bizarre form, identical, so Mrs. Nina Fawcett tells me, with certain inscriptions found cut on a great slab over a vault. In one of them, unknown cities of Atlantean Brazil. The reader will remember that a copy of these strange letters was taken by the old Portuguese bandeirista in or about AD 1750. I have myself discovered some queer links between these strange letters of old Brazil and characters found in Tibet and Vedic Hindustan. One of the ancient letters is almost identical with a sign in Sansar, the ancient form of Sanskrit, which Hindu pagoda traditions said was derived by the ancestors of the Sankritian Hindus from the drowned land of Rutas. All right, so their Hindu traditions are even saying that the persons who brought this Sanskrit form was from another land that drowned, a land called Rutas, it says, which may be identical with the Atlantis of the Pacific Ocean, known as Lemuria or Mu. It is said to have been found on one of the leaves of the mystic Kumbum or Kumbum tree, discovered at the lamasery of Simfau or Sifau by the famous Abehuk, who was subsequently unfrocked by his superiors for his candor and courage in declaring the identity of the ritual of the Roman Catholic Church with that of a Buddhism and Brahmanism. You see that? It passed over to Roman Catholic. The Kumbum tree, it may be stated is the white sandal, tree of 10,000 images, found, it is said, in a great brick walled courtyard of a Buddhist temple at the foot of a mountain. Each leaf of the tree is said to bear one of the characters of Sansar, or ancient Sanskrit, the language of the sun in the drowned land of sun worshippers of the Pacific Atlantis called Rutas. Hug said the sweet mountain to his forehead in his effort to detect any Lamaic fraud about the tree, which he added is very old, about 8 feet high, with brilliant scarlet flowers, and nowhere else exists and cannot be propagated from seed or cuttling. Right, so he gets to this part in page 119. He starts comparing some inscriptions and hieroglyphics, right, from Brazil, India, and Phoenician, right? So on page 119 of this book, it says, let my reader glance at the comparative table below. Now he shows Atlantean Brazil, they found this, Asoka, Old India, values foreign letter K, and Phoenician value Tau, or the Tau, the cross, the Tau, the Ta, Tau, right, one of the also the letters of the Hebrew, Paleo-Hebrew. And it says here Atlantean Brazil on left, right? It says Tibet, Censor, Photo Sanskrit. Then Northern Sanskrit tells you what it is. So on the left is Brazilian, right? Very similar, you see. to the Sanskrit, ancient Egypt. Well, this is Brazil right here. Brazil and Babylon identical. And Philistine, Phoenician, same thing. Early Greek, you see that? Alright, that's from Brazil, or so-called Atlantis, or so-called Lemuria. Atlantean Brazil, over here again, Nineveh, within the other side, Phoenician. Where did they really get their letters from? We was just reading about Augustus the Plegeon, right? But the Maya dialects and vocables, same people, America, right? Amaru Khan. What are they really speaking? The mother tongue. Phoenician, it says, right? Look, very similar. Very ancient Punic or Pau-Ata, India, forms of a letter lame, ox gold. See that? This is from Tyre, Nineveh, Etruria, Moabite, Sidon, Sicilia. Oh, you thought Moabite is just a biblical nation? No, they have stones and everything in Moabite writing, which is basically old Paleo-Hebrew, form of Phoenician Paleo-Hebrew, their own type. All right, and now we got again over here with the triangle and the cross on top. That's from Brazil. All right, then we got over here from Brazil again. Look at that, Phoenician and Carthaginian, the letter Aleph, just like the Hebrew Aleph, right? The first symbol, pictograph, and the Aleph Beth, and the Moabite stone, almost like a W over here, see? Letter Shin. Tyre, Carthage. Early Greek, look at that. They just flipped it. Even more remarkable similarities and identities in respect of these ancient Atlantean Brazilian signs have been found in the islands of the sun and the moon, Titicaca and Coati. Titicaca in Bolivia and Lago de Titicaca of Peru. It was in this very lake that the last known living colony of bearded white men, so-called bearded white men, now he's trying to add the whole hijack, and women of old Atlantean post-cataclysmic Brazil was annihilated by bloodthirsty and savage Coyoans, whose descendants they may be the Aymara Indians of modern Bolivia, while the original Aymara were aboriginal dark-skinned people, aboriginals, the Aymara. It is exceedingly, so is he talking about giants? It is exceedingly probable that the elements of culture and the syllabary of alphabet or hieroglyphics of the old white race of Atlantean Brazil survived for ages afterwards among the primitive races of later Brazil. The Atlantean civilization lasted for thousands of years, and evidence exists to suggest that Diodorus was right in the asserting that the ancient Egyptians derived their hieroglyphics from old Atlantis / America, right? We already got the Masonic book, Ancient Order, the Mystic Order, telling us that ancient Egypt was really America / Atlantis, right? They're letting us know here what I've been trying to tell everybody. This is ancient Egypt, and this is where the Westerners, so-called Westerners, come from, Osiris and the gods, right? Because remember, Menes was the very first so-called physical human god, and before that, their kings and queens were all mythology, gods. Well, these were real people that were living where? In Atlantis, so-called Atlantis, so-called America Tamari, all right? And their hieroglyphics, again, derived from Atlantis, these Egyptians, and that the Phoenician seamen traders took their alphabet from the same civilization. Again, what I've been saying about the Phoenicians, right? They ended up in North Africa and Spain, Iberia. They were, again, coming from Canaan. Canaan was over here in the real so-called Old World, or Atlantis. The Phoenicians coming out of Canaan or Atlantis, basically over here, this real Old World. And they brought what? This hieroglyphic, this Paleo-Hebrew, so-called Paleo-Hebrew, right? That's the reference. But we probably had other words for it, other names for it. But it doesn't matter. It's about the pictograph, the images, right? What was in stone and what was being put out as message, right? In picto form. This was brought over. It was called Paleo-Hebrew. It was called Phoenician. It became Hebrew, what we think of Hebrew today. But it's related to these, glyphs. A lot of them look like the Paleo ancient. Even before the Paleo Hebrew, there's a picto, right? Even before that, there's a picto one. So these Phoenician seamen traders took their alphabet from the same civilization, but in a far later day. when decadence had overtaken the Atlanteans of old South America. The Atlantis of what? Old South America, and the great catastrophe was near at hand. By the side of South America, one suspects the civilizations and cultures of the so-called old worlds of Asia and Europe may be mere parvenus and inheritors. All right, they just may be inheritors. Nor one must repeat is the white race of old Atlantis dodged the hijack. He's adding his white race here as the Atlanteans as found in the old South America extinct today. He says they're extinct. No, they're still there. I'm gonna show these other symbols here. It says here there's like a swastika denoting movement, creation, conception, rotation. It says Lurata, Kamata, Inkata, Hu, Kuta, Kwati, and Titikaka. This one has this denoting I, first before, Naira, Nairan. These are the people, I guess, the places they, Kwati and Titicaca. Look at this one right here. It says a very old woman, Apache, look at that. A very old woman, Coati and Titicaca. And then over here, look, it says a very old man, stricken in years, God, Father. This is Akaki, Aki, and Akachela, Coati and Titicaca. And this is what he's saying he found in Brazil, high Brazilian Atlantean character. And you see how it's very similar. It says here signs at an end of a period. First two characters appear in high Brazilian Atlantean Dead City, Coati, Titicaca, and high Brazil. Over here, Coati and Titicaca, Peru, signs similar to characters in African Tuareg. And the African Tuareg, the Tuareg people who have straight hair, they have straight hair. The Tuareg, a lot of these people in Africa have straight hair. And Pharaoh, and a lot of them say they might be a descendants of the Phoenicians who came out of Canaan, right? So are they really coming out of America, these Tuareg people? Possibly. We got future videos and all this investigation. We're going to see, even if they did mix once they got over there with other peoples. It says Earth, universe, Earth and heaven, Coati and Titicaca. And then it says hell, sign on right, Coati, Titicaca, and Tijuana. Tiwanaku. Over here it says two gods, God Uru, Atlantean Brazilian. Then in the book it says it is likely that American and other prehistorians and archaeologists may be forced sooner or later to revise their ideas on the antiquity of civilization in North and South America. Okay, you're gonna be forced. There's too much information out now. These discoveries of really revolutionary character are on the increase. They're on the increase. This is what has been going on, right? Especially in our journey here, in our community, how we've been learning so much. It's on the increase. It's just going to keep coming out more and more. For example, in the 1 year of 1940, there was found by American archaeologists a colossal head and stone of a man of a clearly, highly civilized race of unknown age or origin. It was carved with great art and sense of character in basalt and was found deep in the jungle at Tabasco, Mexico, which is 20 miles from the modern Mexican coast and more than 100 miles from the nearest source of this volcanic stone. It is obvious that a system of good roads must have linked what is now deep and almost impenetrable jungle and forest with the distinct quarries. Well, we know that to be true because they're finding that now in Guatemala and Mexico and all these places with their LiDAR technology. They're finding out that there's extensive highways and roads connecting all these ancient cities in the jungle. All right, continues, says the head, 1 of 5 is of a man of white. He put his white again. You see, that's the only thing I don't like about this author. He's trying to throw the hijack. Everybody in America to him anciently was white. All right, so we already know. Let's just dodge the hijack there with him. All right, and we're gonna ignore that part. All right, so an aboriginal civilized race, a masterful character, a sense of humor, judging by the expression, and clearly one of a master race. Oh, he said it. This ancient people, a master race. The features are as majestic as the heads of the pharaohs of Karnak and Thebes and the great Ramesses. The experts of the Smithsonian cannot tell what race sculpted these colossal and majestic features. It's funny because I think he's talking about these Olmec heads and some other heads, and they know it don't look like them. So they're like, oh, we don't know what race that is, right? Psych. Sure you don't. All right, so I may not, however, that Tabasco, I may note, however, he says, that Tabasco is the place to which the Atlantean civilizers, the humane Quetzalcoatl, alright, Quetzalcoatl, the Atlantean Quetzalcoatl, man in a black of peace and culture, brought the torch of civilization from High Brazil, the great imperial colony of the motherland of Atlantis. That is saying Quetzalcoatl came out of Atlantis in or about 15,000 or 12,000 BC. Oh, way long time ago. Quetzalcoatl, man, not God, sent to Tabasco colonies from his capital Central American city of Tolan or Cholulan. The other strange discovery is of a bowl or olla found also in 1940 by Dr. Uzdal, the paleontologist, in the mountains of southern California, in the top of a sandstone boulder which erosion has thrown on its side. The bowl bears round its rim the writing of a highly civilized race, for the signs are geometric and phonetic. They were made with great care and not merely scratched on the surface. For how many thousands of years the bowl has lain in the hollow of this rock none yet know, but a clue to the advanced civilization of this great unknown race of North Central America. I give in two signs among others carved on the bowl rim with their probable signification. Alright, and this is what he found. Alright, he's saying in California. And number two is he's saying it's very similar ancient Brazilian sign on ceramics and funerary urns of Marajo Island, Lower Amazon. So he's saying it's kind of similar. Alright, both probably equivalent in meaning to, and it says three, which is this one, ancient Egyptian symbols. You see that's from, they found this in the bowl in California, but backwards they found it in Brazil and also in Egypt. Ancient Egyptian symbol, the Tori or Teri. Alright, and four is another symbol on Oya. On the Oya, this is another symbol they found on the clay. And compared with the ancient signs at Marabajo, Brazil, right? China, ancient Egypt, meaning river spanned by bridge. Alright, so you see how similar it is? All these cultures have the same kind of symbols. Where's the true origin? Nor is the above the only amazing example of diffusion of culture in an incredibly ancient world of civilization, preceding even the dynastic Egypt of the priest of Tyre and Thebes and the ancient Egyptian temple archivists of Solon's day. Alright? He's straight up letting you know, this author, that all this, straight up telling you that this precedes, this is before the dynastic Egypt. This is before all that, before the priests of Thais and Thebes and ancient Egyptian temple archivists, alright, of Solon's day. Because remember, they got the story from the Egyptians talking about there was a place called Atlantis, right, across the water where their ancestors were from. Even Herodotus says the ancient Egyptians, right, of their ancestors coming from a distant western land. The same Amazon basin confronts us with identical signs and symbols stretching hands across a very ancient world of wise men, from China and old India to South and Central America of far pre-Columbian age. How old these symbols may be none yet can say. They may take us back to the days of the Heliolithic culture of 15,000 years ago, before the onrushing waters of the outer Atlantic drowned the black, white, red civilizations of the ancient Mediterranean basin. They were found about 70 years ago in the large island of Marajo, at the mouth of the lower Amazon, which is separated from the port of Belém, North Brazil, by the Rio Pará. In this island there is inset a lake wherein a small island called Pacoval. Here have been found many highly artistic ceramics, idols, ornaments, funerary urns, buried in mound dwellings. Nothing is known about the long vanished race who made them, but one strange fact about the craftsmen emerges when one examines the relics. They depict an extraordinary variety of human faces, so that it seems as if this ancient and unknown people of the old Amazon basin had studied every race in the world. Every race in the world. Some of the figures of the vases and ceramics are strikingly similar in their characteristics to figures found in ancient Mexican monuments. Alright, so even depicting people that look like from the ancient Mexicans. He's saying for races from the world, we know that the Father Crespi collection from Ecuador, that were getting these things from the Amazon jungle, the local Indians, and bringing it over to Father Crespi. If you saw my video on that, part 7 of this series, all right, Father Crespi's collection, who had all this looking like Sumerian and old, so-called old world ceramics and depictions. And he's saying the same thing here, like these faces represent every part of every phenotype, basically, right? These ceramics are often very highly finished and artistic, but what is odd is that no two funeral urns have the same devices, and on only one of them is found a decoration of part of a plant. Their coloring is vermilion or dark black, and in this all primitive races are alike. Again, what? He's saying the color of the people depicted in these vases, what did he just tell you? Is what? Vermilion or dark black. Red or dark black, copper or dark black, vermilion. And in this, all primitive races are alike. All these ancient are what? Vermilion or dark black. Races are alike even to the days of the Paleocolithic man of the famous Altamira caves of the Basque Mountains. Red, black, or yellow is the limit of their color apprehension, and in fact even the Greeks of the heroic epic time of Homer and the much later Aristotle recognized no more than three colors, because even these Greeks that he just named were so-called black. But the amazing features of these ceramics of old Marajo, unknown race of unknown date, consist in the queer resemblances and exact identity of forms found here in old Brazil and in ancient Egypt, India, China, and Aztec or pre-Aztec Mexico. Pre-Aztec Mexico, right? Toltecs and all them. Olmecs, Mayas, all them. You see, so they found all this. It's so striking, the resemblances, right? No one can yet say what chronological relation they bear to the higher and vanished so-called white or vanished Atlantean civilization of the dead cities of High Brazil. But it may be surmised that Marajo's ceramics and mounds belong to a much later age than the former incredibly ancient and vanished civilization. The reader will find these comparative symbols set out below of great interest if he or she is interested in ancient South America, probably the cradle of the world's earliest civilization. Probably, listen to what he's saying, if you're interested in ancient South America, then you'll probably be interested in the cradle of the world's earliest civilization. All right, we got these symbols right here. It says Brazil, Mexico, and China. Look at that. Look how it evolved. A house, or the verb to dwell. Right? Brazil, China, Egypt. Right here it says a battlement wall or defensive barrier found painted or engraved, means also a palisade on the bank or a stream. Right here we got, what is it, a leaf? Brazil, China, Egypt. This is the only vegetable sign found on Marajo ceramics in Egypt and China. The sign made a place covered in woods. Also in Egypt, the syllable am. Alright, sun and sun. A river spanned by the bridge. Got that already. This is the symbol for night. Also suggests a form of lantern or pharos. Means also division of day and night in ancient Chinese. Oh. This means govern or command in Egyptian. It's equivalent to the phonetic symbol F or PH or P. In the Mexican, it's equivalent to Petclal. Alright. Then we got here Brazil, Egypt, China, India. Look what looks like an umbrella, right? Umbrella, shelter, cover, calm. You see? Every country has that. So who's first? Oh, you gotta say, oh, I was gonna say it's Egypt. Nope. We got older stuff here. It's proven. Brazil, Egypt, China says. Same thing it says. Rock or mountain. Brazil, China. Character not met alone but in combination means pyramid or stela. Brazil, Egypt. Is equivalent to the phonetic symbol N. Stands for goddess, Neith. The symbol of old Egypt's Uraeos, idea of cunning or wisdom, is also the symbol of Quetzalcoatl, the wise man in black from High Brazil. In black, the wise man in black, Quetzalcoatl, from High Brazil, who civilized the barbarians. He civilized who? The barbarians and savages of Central America, perhaps about 12,000 BC. Alright? Savages in Central America. Yeah, man, like I said, the true old world had many people. The true old world, remember that. Alright? Brazil, Mexico, China, Egypt, India. Alright? Just evolved to different things. Sign which sometimes represents two arched eyebrows united to the nose, is identical with the tau of the Greek alphabet and corresponds with the Egyptian cross, where it symbolizes omnipotence, grandeur, eternal life, and phallic symbolism. It means the act of coition between male and female. In the Aztecan Dresden Codex and number C Toronto manuscript, it has same meaning. It was also the sign borne by the ancient Egyptian goddess of fire and Sekhmet, so all that means the same, and even in the Mexican codices.
If you're going to propose a lost civilization, there are certain preconditions. You can't have it on a small island. There's got to be a large landmass with enormous resources and the ability for population to grow and for those resources to be mobilized. And what I suddenly realized, you asked earlier why I started to write this book at all, is what the new evidence is pointing to is that the Americas have been wrongly neglected. That here we have a giant continental landmass with extraordinary resources that has just been ruled out of the story of human civilization. But once we take account of the fact that there was a giant cataclysm over North America 12,800 years ago, and once we start looking, as I do in America before, at the incredible, deep, in-depth similarities between, for example, the religious system of ancient Egypt and the religious system of the Mississippi Valley, then you realize that you're into a global mystery here, and that the answer to that mystery may not at all be in the old world, and may very much be in the Americas. In the Americas.
And continuing with this book that we've gone over a lot in past videos, wanted to continue and just finish off, reading things we haven't read from this book or put too close attention to. And this is Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. All right, and this is from 1882. We're in chapter 7. It says here, the origin of our alphabet. One of the most marvelous inventions for the advancement of mankind is the phonetic alphabet, or a system of signs representing the sounds of human speech. Without it, our present civilization could scarcely have been possible, according to him, right? No solutions of the origin of our European alphabet has yet been obtained. They don't know the origin. They can't. It's all guesswork. We can trace it back from nation to nation and form to form until we reach the Egyptians and the archaic forms of the Phoenicians, Hebrews, and Cushites. But beyond this, the light fails us. All right, so this is the only where they can trace language to try to see who created the writing, right? The Egyptians spoke of their hieroglyphic system of writing not as their own invention, but as the language of the gods. Like, oh, that's not ours. That's the gods gave us that. The gods from where? Atlantis, right? From the Westerners, right? From the old world. Lenormand and Cheval, Ancient History of the East, Volume 2, page 208. The gods were doubtless their highly civilized ancestors, the people of Atlantis, like I just said, right? That's their gods. They're people of Atlantis, which is over here in America. All right, you paying attention, right? Who, as we shall hereafter see, became the gods of many of the Mediterranean races. Now, according to the Phoenicians, the art of writing was invented by Tontus or Tot, all right? So these became the gods of all these people, right? The people of Atlantis were real people. They became personified as what? Gods. According to the Phoenicians, the art of writing was invented by Tontus or Tot. All right, we got that in my Tot videos, right? Who this guy is basically Tot, whom the Egyptians called Thoth, right? And the Egyptians said that it was invented by Thoth or Thoth, same thing, same history, same person, who himself said he came from Atlantis in the Emerald Tablets, right? Otherwise called the first Hermes. He's also Hermes. Thoth is Hermes. Thoth is all these epithets, as you call it, in which we clearly see that both the Phoenicians and Egyptians referred the invention to a period older than their own separate political existence. All right, he's pointing out something very big. The Phoenicians and the Egyptians, who are given credit for writing, right? They, even in their own history, they say it's actually older than them. It was given to them. They inherited writing from the so-called gods. And to an older nation, not just gods, from which both peoples received it. They both got it from the same people. because the ancient Egyptians, Egypt was over here in America, and the Phoenicians came out of Canaan. Canaan is America. The promised land is over here. The first Hermes, here referred to afterwards, called Mercury by the Romans. All right, he's also Mercury. That's the same. Thoth was a son of Zeus. So Thoth is the son of Zeus. And Maya, his mom was what? An Atlantean. She was indigenous. Who's the Zeus guy? Is this a fallen angel or a half-breed? One of the giants? And it says here, Maya was a daughter of Atlas. I remember Atlan or Atlas, that's a Nahuatl word. This is the same Maya whom the Abbé Brasseur de Bourbon identifies with the Maya of Central America. The same Maya is a Maya of Central America. All this Greek mythology, they've always been talking about the true old world over here, so-called Atlantis / America. All right, you guys following along? Sir William Drummond on his Origins said, there seems to be no way of accounting either for the early use of letters among so many different nations, or for the resemblance which existed between some of the graphic systems employed by those nations, than by supposing hieroglyphical writing. If I may be allowed to the term to have been in use among the Sabaists in the first ages after the flood, when Sabaism, planet worship, was the religion of almost every country that was yet inhabited. Sir Henry Rawlinson says, so great is the analogy between the first principles of the science of writing, as it appears to have been pursued in Chaldeans, right? And as we can actually trace its progress in Egypt, all right? So remember what we learned about in the Queen Mu book, Chaldeans being Maya, or their language being very similar to the Maya language, their dialects, all those Maya vocables, they're saying the same thing here. Look, they're the ones who pursued it, the Chaldeans, and then it went into Egypt, that we can hardly hesitate to assign the original invention to a period before the Hamitic race had broken up and divided, before the Hamitic race, the sons of Ham had divided, before that language, the writing comes before that. It is not to be believed that such an extraordinary system of sound signs could have been the invention of any one man or even of any one age. Like all our other acquisitions, it must have been the slow growth and accretion of ages. It must have risen step by step from picture writing through an intermediate condition like that of the Chinese, where each word of thing was represented by a separate sign. The fact that so old and enlightened a people as the Chinese have never reached a phonetic alphabet gives us some indication of the greatness of the people among whom it was invented, and the lapse of time before they attained to it. Humboldt says, according to the views which since Champollion's great discovery have been gradually adopted regarding the earlier condition of the development of alphabetical writing, the Phoenician as well as the Semitic characters are to be regarded as a phonetic alphabet that has originated from pictorial writing. All right, letting you know here that before this so-called Paleo-Hebrew, that originated from the picto, a pictorial writing, a pictorial writing glyph. All right, the Semitic, where Hebrew comes from, Phonetic, these Phoenician languages, Semitic languages, all right, they came from a pictorial writing. What's painted in these caves, as one in which the ideal signification of the symbols is wholly disregarded and the characters are regarded as mere signs for sounds. Baldwin says in Prehistoric Nations, page 93, the nation that became mistress of the seas established communication with every shore and monopolized the commerce of the known world, must have substituted a phonetic alphabet for the hieroglyphics as it gradually grew to this eminence, while isolated Egypt. You see that? So they're saying whoever was in the seas, and who was it, right? The Phoenicians. And I've been saying they only say that the Phoenicians, because they brought the Paleo-Hebrew from America. They were coming from Canaan. They brought that over to the rest of the world. So these people who were in communication with every shore, they monopolized the commerce, and they substituted a phonetic alphabet for the hieroglyphics as it gradually grew to this eminence, while isolated Egypt, less affected by the practical wants and tendencies of commercial enterprise, retained the hieroglyphic system and carried it to a marvelous height of perfection. It must be remembered that some of the letters of our alphabet are inventions of the latter nations, and the oldest alphabets There was no C, the G taking its place. The Romans converted the G into a C. You hear that? And then finding the necessity for a G sign, made one by adding a tailpiece to the C. You see? The G, look at that. The Greeks added to the ancient alphabet the upsilon, shaped like our V. See the V's? The Greeks added that V, that va, hova, that va. That was Greek. Or Y, even the Y, the ja, or the ja, or that Y, that's Greek. The two forms being used at first indifferently. They added the X sign. They converted the T of the Phoenicians into the th or theta, Z and S into signs for double consonants. They turned the Phoenician Y, the jot, the Phoenician Paleo-Hebrew into I, iota, I. The Greeks converted the Phoenician alphabet, which was partly consonantal, into the one purely phonetic, a perfect instrument for the expression of spoken language. The spells. The W was also added to the Phoenician alphabet. The Romans added the Y. At first, I and J were both indicated by the same sound. A sign for J was afterwards added. We have also, in common with other European languages, added a W, that is, double V or W, or the W, right, to represent the W sound. The letters then which we owe to the Phoenicians are A, B, C, D, E, H, I, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, and Z. All that came from Paleo-Hebrew, not Phoenician. They brought it out of America. And that came out of what? A pictorial writing before that. If we are to trace out resemblances with the alphabet of any other country, it must be with these signs. Is there any other country to which we can turn which possess a phonetic alphabet in any respect kindred to this phonetic Phoenician alphabet? It cannot be the Chinese alphabet, which has more signs than words. It cannot be the cuneiform alphabet of the Assyria, with its 700 arrow-shaped characters, none of which bear the slightest affinity to the Phoenician letters. It is a surprising fact that we find in Central America a phonetic alphabet, all right? This is in the alphabet of the Mayas, the ancient people of the peninsula of Yucatan, who claim that their civilization came to them across the sea in ships from the east, that is, from the direction of Atlantis. The Mayas succeeded to the Colhuas, who are terminated 1,000 years before the time of Christ. From them they received their alphabet. It has come to us through Bishop Landa, one of the early missionary bishops who confesses to having burnt a great number of Maya books. This same bishop burnt so many books, so why should we trust this guy? Because they contain nothing but the works of the devil. Oh, so now he burned books because it was the devil's work, but then we got to trust what he left. He fortunately, however, preserved for posterity the alphabet of this people we presented herewith. Diego de Landa was the first bishop of Yucatan. He wrote a history of the Mayas and their country, which was preserved in manuscript at Madrid in the library of the Royal Academy of History. It contained a description and explanation of the phonetic alphabet of the Mayas. Landa's manuscript seems to have lain neglect in the library, for little or nothing was heard of it until it was discovered by the French priest Brasseur de Bourbourg, who, by means of it, has deciphered some of the old American writings. He says the alphabet and signs explained by Landa have been to me a Rosetta Stone. Baldwin's Ancient America, page 191, right? A lot of good sources in this book, so let's just look at the alphabet again. So remember, they're letting us know that these are phonetic, these are picto writing. They're letting us know here a little hint where those alphabets come out of, where those letters, Phoenician letters, come out of. All right, you take a look at this. Look at this, ma, me, or ma. We got this. You see this sign right here? That's awesome, because we got this in the Queen Mu book about the Mayak. You see that? The Mayak. That's how the Yucatan Peninsula sticks out. Remember, and that was the 2 points. We broke that down in the other video, in the Queen Mu book. And this is a whole different person. This is from Bishop Landa. This is a primary source, not Augustus Le Plegeon. This is Landa's alphabet from North American Antiquities, page 424. When we observe in the table of alphabets of different European nations, which I give herewith, how greatly the forms of the Phoenician letters have been modified. It would surprise us to find any resemblance between the Maya alphabet of 2 or 3 centuries since the ancient European forms. It must, however, be remembered that the Mayas are one of the most conservative peoples in the world. They still adhere with striking pertinacity to the language they spoke when Columbus landed on San Salvador, and it is believed that language is the same as the one inscribed on the most ancient monuments of their country. Senor Pimental says of them, the Indians have preserved this idiom with such tenacity that they will speak no other. It is necessary for the whites to address them in their own language, to communicate with them. It is therefore probable, as their alphabet did not pass from nation to nation as did the Phoenician, that it has not departed so widely from the original forms received from the Colhuas. But when we consider the vast extent of time which has elapsed, and the fact that we are probably without the intermediate stages of the alphabet which preceded the archaic Phoenician, it will be astonishing if we find resemblances between any of the Maya letters and the European forms, even though we concede that they are related. If we find decided affinities between 2 or 3 letters, we may reasonably presume that similar coincidences existed as to many others which have disappeared under the attrition of centuries. The first thought that occurs to us on examining the Landa's alphabet is the complex and ornate character of the letters. Instead of the 2 or 3 strokes which we indicate a sign for a sound, we have here rude pictures of objects, and we find that these are themselves simplifications of older forms. All right, older forms. So this is the table he's going to show us real quick. Let me just finish reading what he was saying. We'll come back to this. Of still more complex character. So that table we're about to see is just what they left when they got here. So there was something older than that, but he's gonna tell us. So it says, take for instance the letter PP in London's alphabet. Here are evidently the traces of a face. The same appear, but not so plainly, in the sign for X, which is. Now, if we turn to the ancient hieroglyphics upon the monuments of Central America, we will find the human face appearing in a great many of them, as in the following, which we copy from the tablet of the cross at Palenque. We take the hieroglyphics from the left-hand side of the inscription. Here it will be seen that out of 7 hieroglyphical figures, 6 contain human faces, and we find that in the whole inscription of the tablet of the cross, there are 33 figures out of 108 that are made up in part of human countenances. We can see, therefore, in the Landa alphabet a tendency to simplification, and this is what we will naturally expect when the emblems, which were probably first intended for religious inscriptions, where they could be slowly and carefully elaborated, were placed in the hands of a busy, active commercial people, such as were the Atlanteans, and afterwards the Phoenicians. Who were the Phoenicians? Atlanteans. What happened to Atlantis? What did they do in Atlantis? Why did it sink? Men with whom time was valuable. The natural tendency would be to simplify and condense them, and when the original meaning of the picture was lost, they would naturally slur it, and we find it in the letters PP and X of the Maya alphabet, where the figure of the human face remains only in rude lines. All right, so real quick, let's go back to the table. Just want to go ahead and go over this table with you guys. So it says Maya, the first 2 Maya, like this is a little older, this is a more modern Maya. And then we got supposed intermediary forms from the stone of Moab. So this is Moabite stone, which is basically Paleo-Hebrew, a form of Paleo-Hebrew, Phoenician. And then it says Archaic Phoenician. See, it's almost the same. Then it says Phoenician, Carthaginian, all right. And it says Old Greek, Old Hebrew, the Old Hebrew, right? Samaritan, the Samaritans. Remember, they were mixing with Danites, Samaritans. Ethiopian, the Ethiopian, and then Irish. You see this? Irish. Why Irish up in here? Gaelic. What does Gaelic have to do with the Americas? Irish. Later Greek, you see? And then hieroglyphic Egyptian. Hieroglyphic Egyptian, sorry. All right, so we're gonna go. The first one is A. You see, it looks like a boot in Maya. And you see how it can almost be like a boot when by the time it gets to Paleo-Hebrew. You see that it's like a backwards B or a D right here. See the boot? It's a little different, but that's what they're saying right here. We know that's the Aleph in the Hebrew. All right. And then look at this B. And they make it a CG. You see the C in there? Look like Pac-Man. right? Then like a GG. Then see how it becomes? It became a B. Then we got a G over here. Look at that. What's that? Teeth. Then it becomes just the teeth. See? Then the D, the he, or the ha, or the ha, right? See, we know this letter in Paleo Hebrew. V. All right, the different forms of all these. Look at this one right here. XX, look at that. See that? Looks like a mouth with teeth, and then it just it becomes letters, like just stick figures, and then it just becomes a sound. Wow. Look at that, the comb up here. See the feather of comb? And this became, wow, the K. The L. Got an M, backwards MW, look at that. N. You can see how N was an S, just flip it, right? Just flip it, you get the N. Get that, right? Look at this, S is as X, wow. And so on. The same tendency is plainly shown in the two forms of the letter H as given in Landa's alphabet. The original form is more elaborate than the variation of it. The original form is, see the original form? The variation is given as. Now let us suppose this simplification to be carried a step farther. We have seen the upper and lower parts of the first form shrink into a smaller and less elaborate shape. Let us imagine that the same tendency does away with them altogether. We would then have the letter H. All right, you see how that could become H of the Maya alphabet represented by this figure. You see this figure and this figure, right? Now, as it takes less time to make a single stroke than a double one, this will become in time, right? We turn now to the archaic Greek and the old Hebrew, and we find the letter H indicated by this sign. All right, look at that. It's the same thing. Maya alphabet, look at this. Maya, Hebrew, Greek, Maya, Hebrew, Greek, precisely the Maya letter H, simplified. We turn to the archaic Hebrew and we find it, same thing. Look at that. Now it is known that the Phoenicians wrote from right to left, and just as we in writing from left to right slope our letters to the right, so did the Phoenicians slope their letters to the left. Hence the Maya sign becomes in the archaic Phoenician this, all right? So they sloped it, look at that. In some of the Phoenician alphabets, we even find the letter H made with the double strokes above and below as in the Maya H. The Egyptian hieroglyphic for H's, while Che is, all right, almost looks the same, right? In time, the Greeks carried the work of simplification still farther and eliminated the top lines, as we have supposed the Atlanteans to have eliminated the double strokes, and they left the letter as it has come down to us, H. Look at that. They just break a little bit right here and add the. Now, it may be said that all this is coincidence. If it is certainly remarkable, but let us go a step farther. We have seen in Landa's alphabet that there are two forms of the letter M. The first is, but we find also M combined with the letter O, A, and E, says Landa, in this form. All right? Remember, we got this in Queen Mu, Ma, Yak, Ma, Yak. And the M here is certainly indicative of the central part of this combination, the figure. Boom. So we already got this in Queen Mu's book, right? He broke that down heavily. Where does that come from? It is clearly taken from the heart of the original figure wherein it appears. What does this prove? That the Atlanteans or Mayas, when they sought to simplify their letters and combine them with others, took from the center of the ornate hieroglyphical figure some characteristics marked with which they represented the whole figure. Now let us apply this rule. We have seen in the table of alphabets that in every language from our own day to the time of the Phoenicians, O has been represented by a circle or a circle within a circle. Now, where did the Phoenicians get it? Clearly from the Mayas, of course. Remember, we got the 0 and the O over here. There are two figures for O or 0 in the Maya alphabet. They are this one and this other one. Now, if we apply the rule which we have seen to exist in the case of the Maya M to these figures, the essential characteristics found on each is the circle. In the first case, pendant from the hieroglyphic in the other, in the center of the lower part of it, and that this circle was withdrawn from the hieroglyphic and used alone in the case of the M is proved by the very sign used at the foot of Landa's alphabet, which is, Landa calls this Ma, Me, or Mo. It is probably the latter, and it is in we have the circle detached from the hieroglyphic. We find the precise Maya O, a circle in a circle, or a dot within a circle, repeated in the Phoenician forms of O, thus this one and this one, right? And by exactly the same forms in the Egyptian hieroglyphics in the runic. We have the circle in the circle. In one form of the Greek O, the dot was placed alongside of the circle instead of below it, as in the Maya. Are these another set of coincidences? Take another letter, the letter N of the Maya alphabet is represented by this sign, itself probably a simplification of some more ornate form, like almost an ant or a serpent, right? This is something like a Naga serpent. This is something like our letter S, but quite unlike our N. But let us examine into the pedigree of our N. We find in the archaic Ethiopian a language as old as the Egyptian, and which represents the Kushite branch of the Atlantean stock, the Kushite branch, the Kushite, Kush Hamites, the Hamite branch of the Atlanteans that went over there, Phoenicians, just like Ruali said, right? Who the Phoenicians are. The sign for N, Na, is in archaic Phoenician, it becomes still closer to the S shape. All right, so it's almost like a S, right? They're telling you straight out, look, this is the Maya, and this is the Kushite Atlantean Hamitic, right? Look at that, Phoenician. And in Phoenician, even this, almost an S, or in this form, right? Look at that. We have but to curve these angles to appropriate it very closely to the Maya. So I know it's a little confusing what he's trying to tell you, but he's trying to point out certain things that as logical people we can point out is know the origin, because if the Mayas have it, imagine, and then they have other things, where's the true origin of this? What are they really speaking? You know, in Troy, this form was found like this. The Samaritans make it, see how it flipped? The Old Hebrew, the Moab stone inscription is, look, it starts looking different, right? Like a Y almost. The latter Phoenicians simplified the archaic form still further until it becomes, look at that, almost a 7. Then it passed into the archaic Greek form is, the latter Greeks made the N. You see, they just kept flipping it and flipping it. It's just like a backwards S or C, from which it passed into the present form, N. All these forms seem to be representations of a serpent, like I said earlier. We turn to the Valley of the Nile. We find that the Egyptian hieroglyphic for N was the serpent, S. Look at that. Like we were saying, oh really? Just like the Maya, right? The Pelasgians N was this. The Arcadian, same thing, and Etruscan S, same thing. Can anything be more significant than to find the serpent, the sign for N in Central America, and in all these old world languages? Can it be such a coincidence? Now turn to the letter K. The Maya sign for K is, right, this one right here. This does not look much like our letter K, but let us examine it, following the precedent established for us by the Mayas in the case of the letter M. Let us see what is this distinguishing feature here. It is clearly the figure of a serpent standing erect, with its tail doubled around its middle forming circle. It has already been remarked by Savilloni that this erect serpent is very much like the Egyptian Uraeus, an erect serpent with an enlarged body, a sacred emblem found in the hair of their deities. We turn again to the Valley of the Nile. Oh, you see this little serpent right here? And we find that the Egyptian hieroglyphic for K was a serpent with a convolution or protuberance in the middle, precisely as in the Maya, thus, all right? This was transformed to the Egyptian letter All right, the serpent and the protuberance reappear in one of the Phoenician forms of K, while in the Punic we have these forms. All right, look at this K. Now, suppose a busy people trying to give this sign, instead of drawing the serpent in all its detail, they would abbreviate it into something like this. Now we turn to the ancient Ethiopian sign for K or Ka, and we have, or the Himyaritic Arabian, while in the this one, and the Phoenician it becomes, look at that, backwards K. So you see how this became K, or backward K, this became from this. See what he's letting you know, he's showing you how it's just changing. And in the latter Greek, when they changed the writing from left to right, look, left to right, they made us backwards, right? It's a whole process. So that the two lines projecting from the upright stroke of our English K are reminiscences of the convolution of the serpent in the Maya original and Egyptian copy. All right, that was deep right there. Turn now to the Maya sign for T. It is this. You see that? What is the distinction mark above this figure? It is the cross, composed of two circle lines, thus like this, right? The cross, the T, the Tau. It is probable that in this Maya sign, the cross is united at the bottom, like a figure 8. Here again, we turn to the valley of the Nile. We find that the Egyptian hieroglyphic for T is, look, same thing. Let's go back. Same thing. Look what's inside of here. Same thing. Look at that inside. See that? Zoom in. You see that? It's the same thing as the Egyptian. See? Same thing. All right? It's what he's showing you. And in the Syriac T is the same thing too. We even find the curved lines of the Maya T, which give it something of the appearance of the numerical 8, repeated accurately in the Mediterranean alphabet. Thus, the Punic T repeats the Maya form almost exactly. Look at that, almost like an X. Right? Now, suppose a busy people compelled to make this mark every day for thousands of years, and generally in a hurry, and the cross would soon be made without curving the lines. It will become an X. Fast, boom. But before it reached even that simplified form, it had crossed the Atlantic and appeared in the archaic Ethiopian sign for Tasa. Thus, look, it was already over there. And the archaic Phoenician, the sign for T is, look at this, the cross X, little tilted, and X. The oldest Greek form is, look at that, boom, or X. And the later Greeks gave it to the Romans as T, gave it to the Romans as a T, and modified this into minus. The old Hebrew gave it as an X. You see, the old Tau, and the cross. You see, that's the letter T in Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew. Same thing, cross, right? As that Maya glyph. The Moab stone as, again, an X. This became in time a T, or a cross, and T. All right? See how letters transform, where they're getting it from. Take the letter A. In the Maya, there are 3 forms given for this letter. The first is the symbol, right? The third is like the boot looking thing. The first looks very much like the foot of a lion or tiger, like this one. The third is plainly a foot or a boot, right? If one were required to give hurriedly a rude outline of either of these, would not he represent it as thus? Look at that. And we not conceive that this could have been in time modified into the Phoenician A, which was, you see, Phoenician A. The A is this. It's the same thing that looks like this, right? A boot. The hieratic Egyptian A was this. The ancient Hebrew, which was, or again like a A, it's tilted. The ancient Greek was the foot reversed, right? They put it backwards, going up. The latter Greek became our A. See what A? The paw of a lion or jaguar. Originally, that's what it was. Turn next to the Maya sign for Q, or Ku. It is this hieroglyph. Now, what is the peculiarity of this hieroglyph? The circle below is not significant, for there are many circular figures in the Maya alphabet. Clearly, if one was called upon to simplify this, he would retain the 2 small circles joined side by side at the top, and would indicate the lower circle with a line or dash. And we turn to the Egyptian Q. We find it in this shape. All right, this is the shape. If we turn to the Ethiopian Q, or Kwa, we find it in this shape, or a qua, while the Phoenician comes still nearer the supposed Maya form in, look, almost look like the Disney symbol, right? Signature, right? The Moab stone was the Himalaic Arabian form, and the Greek form, which graduated into the Roman Q. All right, so I started out from this. How does it? But a still more striking proof of the descent of the Phoenician alphabet from the Maya is found in the other form of the Q, the Maya Q, which is, look, a circle and an X. Now, if we apply the Maya rule to this and discard the outside circle, we have this left. In time, the curved line would be made straight and the figure would assume this form. And next step would be make the cross on the straight line. Thus, one of the Phoenician forms is, it can all just be accidental. All right, so yeah, it keeps going with all the letters. It starts breaking it down. He starts explaining how it can become, even this one's interesting, you see. And then the P goes over that. I mean, we saw the table, how it changed in all of them. And he's basically explaining the same thing. So just want to get to a specific part of the book. But yeah, he's going over all the glyphs and stuff and how they can become what they become today, or what we know as Hebrew or Greek or whatever, right? Roman, Latin. Continuing, says, it would appear as if both the Phoenicians and Egyptians drew their alphabet from a common source, of which the Maya is a survival. Where did they draw their source from? The people over here in America. But did not borrow from one another. They didn't borrow from one another. They got it from a common source, though. They followed out different characteristics in the same original hieroglyphics, as for instance in the letter B, and yet I have shown that the closest resemblances exist between the Maya alphabet and the Egyptian signs in the CHTIKLMNOQNS, 11 letters in all. In some cases, as in the N and K, the signs are identical. The K in both alphabets is not only a serpent, but a serpent with a protuberance or convolution in the middle. If we add to the above B and U referred to in the Proceedings of the American Philosophical Society, we have 13 letters out of 16 in the Maya and Egyptian related to each other. All right? Can any theory of accidental coincidences account for all this? And it must be remembered that these resemblances are found between the only two phonetic systems of alphabet in the world. It's the only two that exist. The Maya and Phoenician and Egyptian, they are the only people who actually had phonetic alphabets. What is the coincidence in that? Who's older? Who actually has an origin story other than just saying gods gave it to them, right? Letters have an origin story. Sounds, hieroglyphics have an origin story with the Maya. Continues, says, it is probable that a full study of the Central American monuments may throw stronger light upon the connection between the Maya and the European alphabets, and that further discoveries of inscriptions in Europe may approximate the alphabets of the New and Old World still more closely by supplying intermediate forms. We find in the American hieroglyphics peculiar signs which take the place of pictures, and which probably, like the hieratic symbols mingled with the hieroglyphics of Egypt, represent alphabetical sounds. For instance, we find this sign on the walls of the palace of Palenque, right? This sign right here. This is not unlike the form of Phoenician T used in the writing. See? Very similar. Look at that inside. Look at that. And backwards. We find also upon these monuments the letter O represented by a small circle and entered into the many of the hieroglyphics. We also find the Tau, the sign for the T or the cross, right? Often repeated. Also the sign which we have supposed to represent B. Also this sign, which we think is the simplification of the letter K, also this sign, right? So all these signs is finding on the temple, he's saying. All right, so I want to get to this part that it was really interesting. It says, one of the most ancient races of Central America is the Chiapanec, or Japan, Chiapani. All right, get what I'm saying? I'm not saying they're Japanese. I'm saying, where does that word come from? Chiapanec, a branch of the Maya. So this is a specific clan or branch of the Mayas, and that's what I was trying to say earlier about how we think the Mayas, we start grouping different peoples together and we just all call them Mayas. All right, you gotta understand there's different peoples that you're associating as Maya. There are different peoples, different clans, different branches, sometimes even totally different tribes. So the Chapanec branch of the Mayas, specific name. They claim to be the first settlers of the country. Their legends tell us, from the east, from beyond the sea. And even after the lapse of so many thousand years, most remarkable resemblances have been found to exist between the Chapanec languages and the Hebrew. All right, again, who's the Chapanec? A branch of the Mayas. So yeah, so let's generalize like we always do. So the Maya language and the Hebrew. A what? A remarkable resemblance of the Maya language and the Hebrew. Or are we just talking about the Chapanec language? Or you want to get specific now? All right, let's get specific then. Right? Chapanec language and the Hebrew, the living representative of the Phoenician tongue, a living representative of the Phoenician tongue, the Hebrew, right? So that means the Chapanec was speaking what? The Mexican scholar Senor Melgar, North Americans of Antiquity, page 475, all scholarly sources, gives the following list of words taken from the Chapanec and the Hebrew. All right? Chapanec, Mayas, son, Ben, or Ben, Bin, Ben, Hebrew, right? Same thing. Daughter, Bats, Bath. All right? Are you seeing what I'm showing you? We're not Hebrews, Kurimeo. I'm not saying you're a religion. I'm telling you where they got the whole so-called Hebrew from. I'm showing you. You are the book. You are the people of the Bible. All right, is the point. And again, this is a branch of the Mayas. So maybe another branch of the Mayas were other people in the Bible. Get what I'm saying? So Father, Abba, same thing. They're speaking Hebrew. They're letting you know, right? You can go read it in North Americans of Antiquity. We're going to get into all these books, right? Slowly but surely. So you guys probably don't believe this. All right, they're speaking Hebrew. Star and zodiac, Shema in Hebrew. King, Molo, Malok. Name applied to Adam, Abba. Afflicted, Shanam, Hanan, afflicted, Canaan. God, Elab, same thing. September, Tisiking, Tichiri, More, Chi, rich, Kabim, Chabik, son of Seth, Enos, son of Seth, Enos, to give, Votan, to give. That's why we find such extraordinary resemblances between the Maya alphabet and the Phoenician alphabet. We find equally surprising coincidences between the Chapanec tongue, a branch of the Mayas, and the Hebrew, a branch of the Phoenician. Attempts have been repeatedly made by European scholars to trace the letters of the Phoenician alphabet back to the elaborate hieroglyphics from which all authorities agree they must have been developed. But all such attempts have been failures. They haven't been able to figure it out because they don't want to tell you the truth. But here in the Maya alphabet, we are not only able to extract from the heart of the hieroglyphic the typical sign for the sound, but we're able to go a step farther and by means of the inscriptions upon the monuments of Copan and Palenque, deduce the alphabetical hieroglyphic itself from an older and more ornate figure. We thus not only discover the relationship of the European alphabet to the American, but we trace its descent in the very mode in which reason tells us it must have been developed where? In America. All this proves that the similarities in question did not come from Phoenicians having accidentally visited the shores of America, but that we have before us the origin of the source, the origin, America, the origin, the very matrix in which the Phoenician alphabet was formed, and where from the shores of America, the origin. That's where the Phoenicians, the so-called Phoenicians that populated North Africa and Spain and Iberia, right? Some of them became Moors. That's where they came from Canaan, America. They brought their so-called Paleo-Hebrew, this old archaic form of pictograph that was coming from pictorial writings. They were trying to make it phonetic, make it into sounds, make it easier. The Phoenicians, then the Greeks, Latins, and all these other people. In the light of such a discovery, the inscriptions upon the monuments of Central America assume incalculable importance. Why wasn't this taught to us? Well, if we have such discovery, it is monumental. This is big discovery. All right, this is very important. But this is from 1880s, right? They never told us this. They take us back to a civilization far anterior to the oldest known in Europe. They represent the language of antediluvian times. Antediluvian times, the language of the antediluvians, the oldest people on earth, from America. It may be said that it is improbable the use of an alphabet could have ascended to antediluvian times or to that prehistoric age when intercourse existed between ancient Europe and America, but it must be remembered that if the flood legends of Europe and Asia are worth anything, they prove that the art of writing existed at that date of the deluge, and that records of antediluvian learning were preserved by those who escaped the flood, while Plato tells us that the people of Atlantis engraved their laws upon columns of bronze and plates of gold, golden plates. What did the Mormons find in the caves? What did he find? John Smith, he found golden plates written on them, golden plates telling the story, right? Some say that's the Mi'kmaq language. It looked like an Egyptian form. If you know the old Mi'kmaq language, it resembles a very type of Egyptian, old Egyptian. All right, so they're telling us right here that what happened, these survivors, they put their tales and stories on plates of gold and columns. There was a general belief among the ancient nations that the art of writing was known to the antediluvians. The Druids believed in books more ancient than the flood. They styled them the books of Perilt, and the writings of Plegeon or Ahau. Caridwen consults them before she prepares the mysterious cauldron, which shadows out the awful catastrophe of the deluge. All right, so people in these ancient times reading books.
See, it's odd. I mentioned Moundville earlier on. It's kind of odd that we should find what is essentially the ancient Egyptian religion manifesting in the symbolism of Moundville, the ascent to Orion, the transit to the Milky Way, the journey along the Milky Way. These are very specific and idiosyncratic ideas. And what makes it doubly odd is Moundville isn't that old. Moundville, as a site, is about 1,000 years old. Ancient Egypt had already been gone completely from the world for at least 600 years before Moundville was created. The end of ancient Egypt, there's Moundville. And what we're looking at in the foreground is Mound B, and we're looking at Mound A in the distance, and a complete circle of mounds. What is odd about it is we find this system of ancient Egyptian ideas in Moundville 500 years after ancient Egypt has gone from the world. The Romans were the end of ancient Egypt. By 400 AD, ancient Egypt is gone. Moundville doesn't even exist then, but 600 years later, it is created and it manifests the entire set of ancient Egyptian ideas. Clearly, it did not get that as a result of direct transmission from ancient Egypt, unless they were time travelers. The only way I think it could have got it is as a result of a legacy passed down from a much earlier civilization that had influenced and affected many different parts of the world. And the characteristics of that civilization, the shamanistic heart of it, the use of altered states of consciousness, the focus on those, are amongst the reasons that I would suggest that America is the place that we should be looking. And the big mysteries are in the areas that were so devastated at the end of the last ice age, up in the north of North America, the channeled scablands in particular, and then the Mississippi Valley, the whole story of the Mississippi Valley. Yes, Moundville is 1,000 years old, but then you can go back to Poverty Point in Louisiana, which is 2,700 years old. You can go to Watson Brake in Louisiana, which is 5,500 years old. You can go to sites like Conley, which are 8,000 years old. The system keeps on going back and disappearing back into time. And I think the most fruitful new work on exploring the origins of civilization is going to occur counterintuitively in the Americas, the very last place on Earth that archaeologists have ever thought to look. In the Americas, the very last place on Earth that archaeologists have ever thought to look.
All right, now I want to read from this book. It says here, Jose Luis Melgarejo Vivanco. This book is called Totonacapan. This is found in the Institute of Anthropology in the University of Veracruz, Mexico, 1943. All right. And yeah, this book is in Spanish, so we're going to translate it. And this is a little bit of credit given to the author of this book by Enrique Juan Palacios, who's the archaeologist of the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico. All right, saying this is a great book, very informative, very scholarly. We're going to go to a specific part of the book. So before I read that part, I just want to show you how common the word Atlan, A-T-L-A-N, is here in this part of the world. You know, it's a Nahuatl word like this, Zacatlan, Amatlan, Ixhualtlal, Ichicatlan, you see that? Isuatlan, these are all places. Petetlatlan, right? So in Greek, you know how they always add the tis at the end, T-I-S? So Acatlan, tis, Acatlan, tis, Atlantis, right? Miguatlan, Miguatlan, Siguacuatlan, Mextlatlan, Nanacatlan, Tecpatlan, Tlapenatlan, Ayatlan, Mihuatlan, Mihuatlan. That's almost like Manhattan, Mihuatlan, Manhattan. So the Manhattan, the part at the end, Atan, that most probably is in a vocal as well. You know, but I just wanted to show you these examples that this word is common over here. It's not Greek, it's not from the other side of the world, is what the author was saying in the previous book. Now on page 185 of this book, I wanted to read this part. It says origins, orígenes. Now I'm going to grab this paragraph, right, and I'm going to copy paste. I'm going to go to Google, and we're going to try to translate it and read it there. It says, as America rises, there is a sinking world like imperative focus of culture. The northern separation of America and Europe is said to have taken place after the latter part of the Tertiary. Being facts beyond doubt that the valley of the Congo extends under the Atlantic Ocean, and that the aquatic animals of the late Paleozoic correspond between Brazil and Africa. All right, so they're trying to do a connection there, you know, the Pangea thing and all that. But we know, you know, most of these animals originated on this side of the world in America. Even if it was connected, you know, there's still an origin of things. Doesn't matter. So because people like to say Pangea and all this stuff was all connected, but still want to put everything on that part of Pangea, on that side, you know. But no, there's an origin to everything. So let's continue with the book. I'm gonna grab this other paragraph and do the same. All right, it says ethnic tests are intended to ignore the characteristics of the genuinely American fauna and flora. Herdlica affirms that it is a town without connections. There are similarities with Asians to such an extent that Mr. Kennedy points to Java as the cultural focus, but the anthropological evidence is not the forcefulness that was given to them. The anthropology of such comparisons starts from false types originated by multiple factors. Race in the old sense loses its value as the landscape in its modern generating conception. All right, so they're trying to figure out basically who these Americans are, right? In the next paragraph, it says, emigrations can be carried out by a whole people. Something difficult, more easily customs, language, religion. What if peoples are not zoological, linguistic, political, or religious? We will have to look for new concepts. If the Asian migration were made in recent times, even among the most retrospective supporters, geology has unfortunately been deceived and in its mistake dragged to nature, which preserves in its bosom the immemorial imprints of an active and thinking life of the misnamed new continents. A misnamed new continent because it's the true old world. All right, let's grab the next paragraph here. It says, during the reign of Alexander, son of Philip, in 68, Olympiad Ptolemy, according to Pictographs, on this inscription had a stone of Brazil, and under a shield and two swords that Lutein in their spoils, the figure of Alexander. So they're saying they found something in Brazil, showing something that shows like Alexander the Great, while a helmet. So while the helmet, and get the next paragraph, it showed a passage from Icada, Mr. Carlos Lescurian. Oh, they mean from the Iliad, all right, from the Iliad. Let me go back. So there's a passage from the Iliad, all right? That's a Greek word, right? Mr. Carlos Lescurian and Soleta claim to have found unique inscriptions in the Sierra del Cofre de Peroti, Brasil de Borg, like Gomara, another historian, Gomara. They show that the radical ATL does not belong to any other. All right, so they're saying ATL. So in Spanish says that the ATL don't belong to any other symbol other than the Atlantic side or from this part of the world. All right, and when Columbus discovered America, it says, and when Columbus discovered America, there was a city called Atlan in the Gulf of Darien. See, there was a city called Atlan. Just add the TIS at the end. Atlantis. Atlantis. That's what Greeks do. They add the TIS at the end in Latin and Greeks, right? Now I want to read this paragraph. Hopefully it translates it right. If not, I'll try to translate it myself. All right, it says, Schliemann claims to have found under the ruins of Troy a glass with these words, from Kronos, king of Atlantis. Atlantis, right? Atlantis. Kronos was from Atlan, that's in Panama. And it is said that in the Louvre Museum, there is another similar vase found in Tiwanaku, next to Titicaca, that's in Bolivia. One of the pieces from inside the Trojan glass has the head as an ornament of an owl, emblem of Mu. Mu, are we talking about Queen Mu? Let's see if this says Queen Mu over here. Oh, emblema de Mu, emblem of Mu, lechuza, owl, emblem of Mu. Are we talking about Queen Mu of the Maya? It is said that Second Dynasty sent an expedition to search for Atlantis, where his ancestors had come from. They're talking about Egyptians. Let's go to the so cuéntese que sent Segunda Dinastía from the Second Dynasty, sent from the Second Dynasty, he sent an expedition to look for Atlantis, where his ancestors had come from. He's an Egyptian saying his ancestors are from Atlantis, just like Thoth. Remember, Thoth wrote the Emerald Tablets, right? And all these gods are all Westerners. Osiris, Isis, all these, they're all corn deities as well. Corn is an American plant, right? So there was a king, a pharaoh supposedly went to look for his ancestors' home, Atlantis, where they had come from, and there is no lack of interpreter of the Codex Toronto who marks the Maya as the first colonizers of the Lower Nile. Who? The Maya. We got another source in Spanish, like telling us the Maya were the ones who colonized the Lower Nile. They were the first to colonize. Now, when we talking about Lower Nile, we talking about the Mississippi. The Mississippi. Who's the Egyptians? Who's Tamarians? The Tamaricans. And just for the doubters right here, it says, y no falta intérprete. The Toronto Codex. There's a Toronto Codex. This is from the Maya's own writings that were given to the Spaniards. It says that will point out, que señale a los mayas, that the Mayas, como los primeros colonizadores, as the first colonizers del Bajo Nilo, the Nile, of the Lower Nile. The Mayas were the first. There's nobody that would doubt it. There's nobody that would not point it out. They're saying, if you see the Codex Troano, that they were the first colonizers of the Nile. I'm going to copy the next paragraph, all right, just so we can read that as well. And put it here. I know this translation sucks a little bit, but we try to fix it if it sounds funny. Now it says, Schwartz's interest in studies of the inscriptions and manuscripts of India, China, Tibet, Babylon, the islands of the Mar del Sur and Mayapan, as well as mystical books from Egypt and Greece, led him to conclude that the continent of Mu was the true civilizing focus and that the civilization was Mayan. It was Mayan, really. That whole Mu and Lemuria and all that, that's Mayan. That was Mayans. Remember, they try to make it into a whole mystical lost place and all this. You know, it was really, they found these things in Mexico. I did the video about it in the Nagas and how that guy stole the guy's research and created his own story about Lemuria. All right, but really, it was the civilization of the Mayan. The founding of Babylon grants it to the Naga Maya of India. We just came over from reading about Akkadians and Mayans right from the Queen Mu book. This other book is telling us the same thing, right? Who are the Maya Naga, the Naga Maya of India? They founded Babylon and the Nile, right? The Lower Nile. They founded Babylon. Who? The Maya. Who colonized who? Who civilized who? The founding of Babylon grants it to the Nagas Maya of India and makes a remarkable comparison between Chaldean voices and Nagas of 8. I don't know what that means. The 8th century, maybe, the Nagas, or the 8th century BC. All right, so again, what? The Chaldean, we just got that too from the Queen Mu book. Who were the Chaldeans? We remember Abraham's father was a Chaldean. Is that a clan of the Maya, ancient Maya Naga? You see what I'm saying? So, another author, more correlation, right? A comparison between Chaldean voices and Nagas of the 8th centuries before Christ with the Maya. George Smith discovered the Gilgamesh in Babylon book containing the legend of the eagle and the serpent, similar to that of the Aztecs. All right, this eagle and the serpent. So that's not just an Aztec thing. So that's found all throughout the Americas and actually all over throughout the world. But it has its origin here in the Americas. That's what he's letting you know. All right, they have the same symbols in these Babylonian books because it was carried over there. All right, by the Maya Naga.